Hey, in this lecture you learn about loops, and loops are very important. They are one of the fundamental building blocks of the Python programming language and of every other programming language as well, because loops are crucial. So what are loops? Well, loops are basically a way that allow you to execute a statement multiple times. So what does that mean? Let's say you have a bunch of files, text files, and you want to insert a certain string inside each of these text files. So you'd have to open those text files in Python by writing the Python code that corresponds to opening a file, and then you'd insert that string inside the file and close the file and save it. So there is some code that does this opening and inserting the text and closing the file. And if you had 100 files, you'd have to execute that code 100 times. So you'd come up with, let's say, 100 lines of code. But that doesn't sound very efficient. So that's what loops are for. So a productive way to solve the problem that I just mentioned would be to create a list of these files, so a Python list of the file names, and then you would use a loop to iterate through this list of file names. And a loop would do all that in just a few lines of code. And there are two kinds of loops in Python. There is the for loop, and the example that I just mentioned would be solved using a for loop. And we also have the while loop. A while loop does also repeatedly execute a statement that you write, and it executes it as long as a given condition is true. So let's say you have a user that is trying to log in your web app, and while he keeps entering the wrong password, you'd continue executing a statement that would reject his login into your system. So while the password is wrong, reject the user, something like that. So that's about the definition of the for loop and the while loop. In the next lecture I'll show you the syntax of the for loop, and by also looking at an example. So see you in the next lecture.